Now that your son is gone, you should pack your things and leave before the week is over," my daughter-in-law said at the dining table. Her voice didn't rise. It didn't need to. The way she pushed her plate forward, the way she wouldn't look at me, those were enough to make the room tilt a little. I didn't answer. I simply placed my napkin on the table and stood. My chair barely made a sound as I pushed it back. That was important to me, leaving quietly, with whatever dignity I still had. I walked to my room, folded the few clothes I had, and zipped my small suitcase. No shouting, no pleading, just movement. "I'm glad to have you here. Follow my story until the end and tell me the city you're watching from. It helps me feel a little less alone." The house felt different without Michael. The dining room was dimmer somehow. The oak table he refinished by hand looked too long, too empty. The chairs seemed farther apart. I stood there a moment, letting the silence settle on my shoulders like a heavy quilt. Grief doesn't make noise. It just changes the shape of the air. It had been only 7 days since we buried him. 35 years of marriage, and the world moved on in a week. I still caught myself reaching for a second mug in the morning. The one he always used. Dark blue with a tiny chip on the rim. I kept it in the cabinet anyway. I couldn't bring myself to move it. Dinner that night was the first time we'd all sat together since the funeral. I tried to pass the bowl of potatoes to my daughter-in-law earlier, hoping to keep the peace, but she didn't lift her eyes. My son, her husband, kept his gaze on his plate the entire meal. Not once did he look at me. Not once did he speak my name. A week ago, he held my hand at the graveside. Today, he acted as if I were a guest who had overstayed. When I stepped out onto the porch with my suitcase, the air felt colder than it should have for early spring. I waited for him to come after me, to at least say goodbye, or something small like, "Call me when you get there." But the door stayed closed. I walked down the path slowly, my steps steady. Behind me, the lights in the kitchen flicked off. I realized then that I wasn't just being asked to leave the house. I was being erased. I walked the half-mile to the bus stop with my small suitcase rolling behind me, its wheels clicking over the cracks in the sidewalk. The sun was lowering, turning the neighborhood a soft gold, the kind Michael used to call porch-light hour. I kept my eyes forward. If I looked back at the house, I knew something in me would crack. The first bus wasn't due for another 20 minutes. I sat on the cold metal bench and placed my suitcase at my feet. Cars passed. None slowed. None of them belonged to my son. I kept telling myself he needed time, that grief made people withdraw, that maybe he didn't mean to let her speak for both of them. But the silence from the house had been too complete, too practiced. He had chosen it. I checked the small envelope in my coat pocket, the one Michael's lawyer had mailed 3 days after the funeral. "For your records," the cover letter said. I hadn't opened the thicker document inside yet. I kept thinking I would wait for a moment when it didn't hurt, but moments like that hadn't come. The bus arrived with a hiss. I climbed aboard, nodded to the driver, and settled into a window seat. As we pulled away, I saw the roof of the house fade behind the rows of trees. I whispered a quiet goodbye, not sure who I was saying it to, my husband, my son, or the life that had slipped out from under me. My motel for the night was simple. Small lobby, coffee machine humming. A front desk clerk who offered a gentle smile when I checked in. I carried my suitcase up the stairs, opened the door to my room, and stood for a long moment absorbing the stillness. A queen bed. A lamp that flickered when I turned it on. A window facing the parking lot. Not home, but at least it was mine for now. I hung my coat over the back of the chair and sat on the edge of the bed. My shoulders finally loosened. There is a kind of exhaustion that doesn't come from walking or carrying bags, an exhaustion of being pushed out of your own story. I lay back and stared at the ceiling. The motel air conditioner hummed, steady and predictable, unlike the last week of my life. Later, I walked to the vending machine outside my room. A bottle of water, a pack of almonds, enough to take the edge off the hunger I'd ignored at dinner. When I returned to the room, I finally took the envelope out again. I held it in my hands, feeling its weight, wondering why Michael had insisted on mailing it instead of leaving it somewhere obvious at home. I didn't open it, not yet. Instead, I turned off the lamp and lay in the dark. Memories came in slow waves, Michael laughing at the 4th of July parade, Michael fixing the railing outside, Michael falling asleep on the couch with the TV on low. I held on to those small things, the ones no one can take from you, the ones that survive even when the house doesn't feel like yours anymore. Morning came with pale light creeping through the curtains. I rose, washed my face, and made a cup of the motel coffee, bitter but warm. My phone vibrated once, an automated message from the cemetery reminding me of the temporary marker they were placing. Nothing from my son. Nothing from her. I packed my bag again, not because I had somewhere to be yet, but because it kept my hands busy. On the desk, the unopened envelope waited. I placed it gently into my suitcase. Whatever truth it held, it would follow me to the lawyer's office later that afternoon. For now, I stepped outside into the cool morning air. A light breeze brushed past me, carrying the smell of fresh-cut grass from a nearby lot. I stood still, letting it calm me. I didn't know what the lawyer would say, but I did know this. I wasn't going to let silence push me out of my own life again. I took a slow breath and started the walk toward the lawyer's office. It was only a few blocks from the motel, past a bakery that smelled of warm bread, past a hardware store Michael used to wander through on Saturday mornings. The world kept moving in its ordinary rhythm. I felt out of step with all of it. The law office sat on the corner, a small brick building with neat windows and a brass handle polished from years of hands gripping it. Inside, the air was cool and smelled faintly of paper and lemon cleaner. A receptionist nodded and asked my name. I gave it softly, as though speaking too loudly might break something in me I was still trying to hold together. She led me to a small conference room with a round table and 2 chairs. A framed photograph of the town's lake hung on the wall. I sat and placed my purse on my lap, my fingers worrying the zipper without thought. I could hear the muffled sound of a copier somewhere down the hall. The clock above the door ticked steadily. Its patience made me feel even more restless. When Mr. Harlan entered, he gave me that same gentle nod he'd given me at the funeral. "Thank you for coming," he said. His voice was calm. That calm always made me brace. Calm meant something heavy was coming. He set a folder on the table and sat across from me. "I have the amended document your husband signed 2 months before his passing," he said. "He asked that I make sure you understood everything clearly." I nodded, though my throat felt tight. He slid the folder closer. My hands didn't move. I waited. "He left instructions regarding the house," he continued, "and the savings account, and a few matters he didn't wish to discuss during his illness." The air shifted. I felt it. A small change, like the room leaning slightly. I folded my hands to keep them steady. He paused before opening the folder. "There is also a note." A note. My breath caught. Small words, but they made something inside me ripple. I looked up. He waited, giving me time, the way someone does when they know you're walking into a memory you've been avoiding. I nodded for him to continue. He opened the folder gently, as though the paper might bruise. "Your husband wrote that he was concerned about certain behaviors in the house, that he wanted to make sure your long-term security was protected." The room felt suddenly smaller. The edges of the table sharpened in my sight. I thought of the way my daughter-in-law had spoken to me at dinner, the way my son wouldn't meet my eyes, the quietness of that house after the funeral, the cold that had nothing to do with weather. I said nothing. Silence felt safer than questions. Mr. Harlan slid a page toward me. "He added your name back onto the deed," he said, "and updated the beneficiary information. You were the primary." I stared at the page, not reading yet, just looking at the type, the signatures, the date. My husband's handwriting in the corner, familiar but shakier. My chest tightened, not with sorrow this time, with something steadier, something that felt like being seen. "He also wrote," the lawyer added slowly, "that you should not make any decisions until after the formal reading of his will next week." Next week. A date. A place. A moment where everything my daughter-in-law thought she controlled would be laid out plainly. I folded the page, careful not to crease the signature. "Thank you," I whispered. When I left the office, the afternoon sun was bright, reflecting off parked cars and storefront windows. I blinked against the glare. The town felt different now, no less ordinary, but no longer indifferent. I walked slowly, letting the air clear my thoughts. The envelope in my purse felt heavier than paper. It felt like a promise. And for the first time since the funeral, I didn't feel erased. I felt like someone who still had a place in her own story. I walked back to the motel with the folder pressed against my side, the way you'd hold something fragile. The sidewalk shimmered with heat. A few cars rolled by, their radios faint behind closed windows. I moved slowly, not because I was tired, but because everything inside me felt newly unsteady, like the ground had shifted, but in a direction I hadn't expected. Inside my room, I locked the door and sat on the edge of the bed. I opened the folder again. This time, I let myself read. Each line felt deliberate, as if Michael had chosen every word with the little strength he had left. He had known something, or at least sensed it. The changes he made weren't accidental. The house, the savings, the account I thought he'd forgotten about years ago. My name beside each one. I closed the folder and placed it on the nightstand. The lamp's yellow light made the papers glow faintly. I traced the edge of the envelope still unopened inside my purse. I wasn't ready for it. Not yet. But the knowledge that it existed no longer frightened me. It felt like a hand on my back, steadying me. I walked to the small window overlooking the parking lot. A pickup truck pulled in, someone carrying a box of takeout inside. A young family stepped out of a van, the mother adjusting her toddler's shoes. Ordinary scenes. I watched them quietly, letting the simplicity of it all soften the ache in my chest. My phone buzzed. For a moment, hope rose, absurd, but real. I checked the screen. It wasn't my son. Just a reminder from the funeral home about choosing a permanent marker for the gravesite. I silenced the notification and set the phone down. I made myself a cup of the motel coffee again, even though it tasted thin. Holding something warm helped. I sat at the small table and let the steam rise against my face. When evening settled, I walked outside for air. The sky had turned a deep blue, the first stars starting to appear. I stood under the dim porch light, listening to the steady hum of passing cars on the main road. Across the lot, a woman around my age got out of her car, balancing a bag of groceries. She glanced at me with a polite nod. I returned it. For a second, I wondered what she saw. A traveler, a widow, or just another woman trying to keep herself together. I went back inside and shut the door gently. On the bed, the folder waited. Not demanding. Just present. I placed my hand on top of it. Next week. The reading of the will. My daughter-in-law's certainty. My son's silence. All of it was leading toward something I could finally feel settling into place. I didn't know how they would react. I only knew this. Whatever happened, I would walk into that room with the truth beside me. For the first time in days, I slept without waking. The next morning, I woke before the alarm. The room was still dim, the air cool enough that I pulled the thin motel blanket around my shoulders while I sat up. For a moment, I didn't move. I listened to the low hum of the air conditioner, the sound of a car starting somewhere outside, the quiet that follows a long night of thinking. My thoughts were clearer than they had been in days. I dressed slowly, choosing a soft sweater and the slacks Michael always said looked neat, even on a tired day. I brushed my hair in the bathroom mirror, watching the lines on my face shift with each movement. Not harsh lines, just markers of the years I had lived, the years I had loved. I held the edge of the sink and let out a soft breath before stepping back into the room. On the table sat the untouched envelope, the one from the day after we buried Michael. I rested my fingertips on it, but didn't open it. I didn't need the full truth all at once. Some truths arrive in pieces, and that is enough. I packed my purse, slid the envelope back inside, and left the room key on the desk. At the front desk, the clerk wished me a good day. I managed a small smile. "You too," I said, and meant it. Outside, the morning sun was warm already. I walked to the bus stop, suitcase rolling behind me again. The town was waking slowly. Someone sweeping a storefront, a man setting out a chalkboard sign for the cafe, a jogger passing with a wave. I held on to those small gestures. They felt human in a week that hadn't. On the bus, I watched houses slide past the window. Lawns trimmed, flags fluttering lightly, a dog lying on a porch watching cars with half-open eyes. Families heading out for their day. My hands tightened around the strap of my purse as a familiar street came into view. My old neighborhood. I didn't turn my face fully toward it. I wasn't ready to see the house. Not from the bus. Not from this angle. I got off near a small park and took a seat on a bench shaded by a tall maple tree. Its leaves rustled softly, a sound I'd always associated with late summer evenings when Michael would grill in the backyard. I let the memories settle, not pushing them away, not holding them too tightly. My phone buzzed once, a message from my son. I stared at the screen before opening it. "Hope you're okay." Just that. Nothing more. No question, no apology, no request to talk. A sentence that felt like a duty, not concern. I locked the phone and placed it beside me on the bench. A breeze swept through, cool for mid-morning. I closed my eyes, letting it touch my face. When I opened them, I felt steadier. The will reading was only days away now. The folder in my purse held answers. The envelope held more. My son and daughter-in-law had no idea what Michael had changed, no idea what he had seen, no idea that the woman they dismissed had not walked away empty. I rose from the bench, brushed off my slacks, and picked up my suitcase. The town ahead looked the same as always, but something inside me had shifted. I wasn't returning to the house. I wasn't returning to silence. I was walking toward the moment Michael had prepared for, quietly, carefully, and with a kind of strength I didn't know I still carried. I spent the next 2 days in a small rhythm that kept my mind steady. Morning walks to the cafe for a simple breakfast. Afternoons in the park, sitting under the same maple tree, letting the shade settle over me. Evenings back at the motel, where the hum of the air conditioner filled the quiet. Nothing dramatic, nothing sharp. Just enough structure to keep the worry from biting too hard. But the closer the will reading came, the more I felt the air change around me. Not in a frightening way, more like a faint pressure building behind a closed door. On the third morning, I took my coffee to the bench across from the bakery. People flowed in and out with pastries and warm paper bags. The smell of cinnamon rolls drifted through the breeze. I watched a mother lift her child to the counter, the little girl pressing her hands to the glass case as she pointed to something sweet. The mother laughed, her eyes soft. I felt a small ache then, not jealousy, just a wish. A wish that my son had once looked at me with that kind of warmth. Or maybe he had, long ago, before everything got tangled in grief and the cold influence of the woman he married. My phone buzzed again. A second message. "Will reading is next Wednesday. We'll be there." No greeting, no name. Just the facts. It wasn't surprising. It still stung. I didn't reply. Instead, I opened my purse and took out the folded page from the lawyer's folder. I didn't read it again. I simply held it. Paper can't give comfort, but the intention behind it can. Michael's handwriting at the bottom, it grounded me. By noon, I walked toward the main street. I passed the florist where Michael used to buy me small bouquets on our anniversaries. Carnations, mostly. He said they lasted longer than roses and looked cheerful even when you forget to change the water. I smiled at the memory before continuing on. At the corner, a familiar car turned onto the street. A dark sedan. My son's. It moved slowly, scanning the sidewalk. I froze for a moment, then stepped back behind the bench. I wasn't hiding. I just wasn't ready. He didn't see me. The sedan kept rolling until it disappeared past the grocery store. A tightness gathered in my chest. Not fear, just a mixture of longing and disappointment. I waited until the feeling settled, then kept walking. The motel room felt warmer than usual when I returned later. Sunlight filled the space, brushing across the bedspread. I set my purse on the table and stood there a moment, absorbing the stillness. I needed it. The world outside felt too close, the will reading too near. I took the envelope from my purse, the one I'd been carrying since the funeral. I rested it on my lap while I sat on the bed. My thumb traced the corner. For the first time, I felt ready to open it. Ready, not desperate. But I didn't. I placed it gently back inside my purse. Not out of fear, but out of timing. Some moments ask to be opened only when you know who you are again, and I was still finding that footing. As evening settled, I stepped outside. The motel lights flickered on, casting soft halos across the parking lot. A few guests stood by the vending machines, chatting quietly. A dog barked somewhere in the distance. Ordinary noises, steady and grounding. I closed my eyes and let the warm breeze brush past me. Next Wednesday was coming. My daughter-in-law's certainty was coming with it. So was the truth Michael left behind, and I would be there, calm, steady, unshaken. Not to fight, but to finally hear what my husband had wanted me to know. The night before the will reading, sleep came in thin, uneven strands. I lay in the motel bed, listening to the steady hum of the air conditioner, the occasional car pulling into the lot, the soft creak of pipes behind the wall. My thoughts drifted between memories of Michael and the cold expressions on my son's face at the dinner table. Every few minutes, I turned my pillow over to the cooler side. Near dawn, I finally gave up on rest. I sat up slowly, letting my feet find the floor. The sky outside was still dim, a pale gray stretching over the town. I made a cup of the weak motel coffee, holding it in both hands while I stood at the window. The parking lot was empty, except for a single pickup truck. Its owner must have slept better than I did. I dressed with deliberate motions. A clean blouse, the same soft sweater. Simple earrings Michael had given me on our 20th anniversary. I didn't want to look grand, just put together. Whole. Before leaving, I opened my purse and checked for the folder from the lawyer. I didn't take out the envelope this time. I just touched it gently, feeling its corner under my fingertips. It calmed me. Outside, the early morning air was cool enough to wake my senses. I walked to the bus stop, suitcase rolling behind me even though I wouldn't need it today. I carried it because having something steady at my side made me feel grounded. The bus arrived quickly, its doors opening with a soft hiss. I took a seat near the front and watched the town glide past as the sun climbed slowly over the rooftops. When I arrived near the lawyer's building, I stepped off and stood still for a moment. The sidewalk was bright in the morning light, the bakery across the street already open. People carried warm bags out the door, the smell of toasted bread drifting across the intersection. Normal life continued, unaware of what today meant to me. I crossed the street and walked toward the office. My steps were slow, but not hesitant. Inside, the receptionist greeted me with a kind look, as if she remembered how quiet I'd been on my last visit. She gestured toward the same conference room. I sat alone for a few minutes. The clock on the wall ticked softly. I folded my hands on the table and focused on my breathing. In through the nose, out through the mouth. Steady. Then I heard footsteps. 2 sets, not one. The door opened. My son walked in first, his expression guarded. My daughter-in-law followed, eyes sharp, lips pressed together as if she were already annoyed. She didn't look at me. My son gave me a small nod, barely more than a tilt of his chin. I nodded back. They sat on the opposite side of the table, a distance that felt wider than the wood between us. Mr. Harlan entered last, closing the door gently behind him. He placed a thicker stack of documents on the table and adjusted his glasses. "Thank you all for being here," he said. My daughter-in-law folded her arms. "Let's just get this over with." Her impatience hung in the air like a draft. I kept my eyes on the table. My fingers rested lightly on the folder I'd brought with me. Not gripping it, not hiding it, just touching it, the same way one touches a railing before taking a step. The lawyer cleared his throat and opened the will, and silence settled over the room. Heavy, expectant, almost fragile. As if the truth inside those pages had been waiting for this exact moment to breathe. Mr. Harlan began reading the will in a steady, measured voice, the kind of voice meant to keep emotions from spilling over. My son sat stiffly, hands clasped in front of him. My daughter-in-law leaned back in her chair, bored already, tapping one fingernail against the table. The rhythm was sharp, impatient. Most of the opening sections were formalities, dates, statements of sound mind, acknowledgments. My daughter-in-law sighed loudly at one point. My son shot her a small look, but he didn't correct her. He hadn't corrected anything in a long time. Then the lawyer turned the page. Something in his posture changed, barely, but enough that I noticed. He cleared his throat again. "Now," he said quietly, "regarding the marital home and the financial accounts." My daughter-in-law straightened, her whole body tightening like she'd been waiting for this exact moment. "Finally," she muttered. I didn't move. I kept my gaze on the corner of the table, where the grain of the wood formed a small, swirling knot. Mr. Harlan continued. 2 months prior to his passing, Michael updated the deed to the house. He reinstated his wife, he paused just long enough for the words to sink in, as the primary owner. The room stilled. My son blinked. Once. Hard. My daughter-in-law's mouth opened slightly, closing again before a sound could escape. Her fingers stopped tapping. Her chair stopped rocking. Something inside her seemed to lock into place, uncertain, off balance. "That must be a mistake," she said finally, her voice thin. Mr. Harlan shook his head gently. "No mistake. He signed the amendment himself. I advised him on it." My son looked down at his hands, knuckles whitening. "Dad never told me." "He planned to explain after he regained his strength," the lawyer said. "He didn't get that chance." The silence that followed felt heavier than the words themselves. I kept still, my breathing slow. I didn't gloat. I didn't look at them. I let the moment speak for itself. The lawyer went on, turning another page. "Regarding the savings accounts, Mrs. Carter remains the sole beneficiary." My daughter-in-law inhaled sharply. It wasn't loud, but it cut through the quiet like a snapped twig. "What do you mean, remains?" she asked, leaning forward. "He said he was changing them." "He said he did change them," Mr. Harlan replied. "He restored them to his wife." She stared at him, eyes narrowing. "That's impossible. He promised." My son reached for her arm, a small gesture that should have looked comforting, but instead looked like a man trying to keep something from spilling over the edge. The lawyer continued, steady and calm. "Now, the final note from your husband. He asked that it be read aloud." I felt the air shift around me, not with fear, but with recognition. This was the part I had sensed, the one Michael had written for this room, this table, this exact moment. Mr. Harlan unfolded the single page. My daughter-in-law leaned forward, hungry for control. My son stared at the table, unmoving. Unmoving. The lawyer read, "If this letter is being heard, then I did not have the time to say these words myself. My final wish is simple. My wife is to be protected. She has given more to this family than anyone knows. If anyone stands in the way of her safety, her home, or her peace, know that I saw it long before I fell ill." My daughter-in-law paled. A small, barely noticeable tremor passed through her hand. My son swallowed hard. I didn't move. I didn't speak. I simply sat there, letting Michael's words settle over the room like a quiet tide, steady, certain, undeniable. Mr. Harlan lowered the letter slowly, giving the room a moment to breathe. No one spoke. Even the ticking clock on the wall felt louder than it should have. My daughter-in-law sat frozen, her lips parted but unable to form words. My son stared at the table as if he were searching for something he had misplaced long ago. The lawyer cleared his throat softly. "There is one final section," he said. "Your husband added it the same day he updated the deed." My daughter-in-law's eyes snapped toward him. "What else could there possibly be?" Her voice cracked on the last word. I kept my gaze lowered, tracing the grain of the table with my eyes. Calm. Still. Mr. Harlan turned the page. "He added a clause regarding occupancy of the home." My daughter-in-law straightened. "Yes, exactly," she said quickly, clinging to the words. "He said the house was going to be ours, that we'd take over payments and—" "That clause was removed," the lawyer said gently. "Your father-in-law revoked it." Her face fell so fast, I almost heard the sound of it. She blinked hard, then leaned forward as though the table might give her better footing. "Why would he do that?" "He didn't provide a reason in writing," the lawyer said. "But he did leave a verbal note for me. He said, quote," Mr. Harlan checked the margin of the page, "I've seen enough to know she won't be safe there without me." Silence again. My son's shoulders slumped. His hands loosened and then tightened again. He looked like a man waking from a long dream and not liking the room he found himself in. My daughter-in-law shook her head. No, that's wrong. He trusted us. He told me. He promised. He consulted me directly," the lawyer said. "Your mother-in-law was not present, and neither were either of you." The words landed like stones dropped in water, heavy, final, rippling outward. My daughter-in-law's voice trembled. "So what happens now? She gets everything. She gets the house, the accounts, and we get nothing." The lawyer folded his hands. "He made provisions for both of you, but the home and primary assets go to his wife. That was his final decision." My son finally spoke, his voice almost a whisper. He didn't tell me." "He was worried you were under strain," the lawyer said. "He said he hoped time would help you see clearly." My son let out a long, unsteady breath. My daughter-in-law, however, was unraveling. Her composure thinned like ice under sunlight. "You can't expect us to accept this," she said. "We've lived in that house. We've "It was never yours," Mr. Harlan said quietly. Her mouth opened and closed again. She looked at my son for help, but his eyes were distant, lost somewhere between guilt and realization. I kept still, breathing evenly. Not triumphant, not angry, just present. Then the lawyer reached into the folder and pulled out a smaller envelope. "This," he said, "was meant for today. Your husband asked that I hand it to his wife only after the will was read." He placed it gently on the table in front of me. My daughter-in-law stared at it, her expression twisting, shock, confusion, then something close to fear. My son finally looked at me. Really looked. For the first time since the funeral. I rested a hand on the envelope, but didn't open it. Not yet. The room, tense and brittle, felt as though one more truth could make everything inside it crack. Mr. Harlan waited a moment before speaking again, giving space for the weight of the last words to settle. My hand rested lightly on the unopened envelope. I didn't lift it. The air in the room felt different now, still tense but clearer somehow, as if the truth had finally found its place. "There is one final detail in the will," the lawyer said, adjusting his glasses. "Your husband asked that it be announced publicly during this reading." My daughter-in-law stiffened. "What else?" Her voice was thin, stretched. My son didn't speak. He stared at the table, shoulders hunched, as if bracing for something he already sensed was coming. Mr. Harlan flipped to the last page. "This concerns the secondary property, the cabin in Willow Ridge." My daughter-in-law blinked. "The cabin?" Her confusion was real. "He never mentioned—" "He bought it privately," the lawyer said. 10 years ago, he kept it under a separate trust." My son looked up, startled. "Why would he?" "It was meant to be a retirement place," Mr. Harlan said. "A quiet space for the two of you once he stopped working. He asked that the trust remain quiet until after his passing." The room fell silent again. I remembered the way Michael would talk sometimes, in quiet little hints, about wanting a place with a porch, or somewhere far from all the noise. I never pressed. He always smiled and said, "One day." The lawyer continued, "The cabin is paid off, fully furnished, maintained regularly, and it remains in your name alone." My daughter-in-law blinked rapidly, her face paling. "What do you mean, her name? Why wouldn't we?" "Because he never added either of you to the trust," the lawyer replied gently. "He wanted it kept separate." My son swallowed, his voice rough. "Dad planned all of this without telling us." "He planned it for years," Mr. Harlan said, "and he documented everything carefully." My daughter-in-law leaned back in her chair. Her confidence, so loud, so certain, had drained out of her. "So she gets the house and some cabin in the mountains?" "It's not a cabin," the lawyer said calmly. "It's a primary asset. Land. Renovations. A property worth significantly more than the house." Her breath caught. "Worth more?" "Yes," he said. The words hit the table like a quiet shockwave. My son's expression changed. Not anger, not disbelief, something softer. Something like the realization of a father's intention. His gaze shifted to me again, and for the second time that morning, he actually looked at me. Not past me. Not through me. My daughter-in-law, however, leaned forward sharply. "You're telling me she gets everything? Everything he worked for?" The lawyer didn't flinch. "Your father-in-law made provisions for both of you. But the major assets, the properties he valued most, he placed entirely under his wife's name." Her voice cracked. "He must have been manipulated. He was sick." "No," Mr. Harlan said firmly. "He made these decisions long before he got sick. They had nothing to do with his illness." The last bit of color drained from her face. I didn't speak. I didn't need to. My silence filled the room more than any words could have. She turned to my son, desperate now. "Say something. Do you hear what he's saying? This can't be right." My son rubbed his forehead. I don't know what to say." She let out a shaky exhale, her voice rising for the first time. "We've been living in that house. We paid bills, we took care of everything, and she gets to come back and take it all." I lifted my eyes just enough to meet hers. "I never left," I said quietly. "You pushed me out." The room froze. My daughter-in-law stared at me, truly stared, as if hearing my voice for the first time. My son shifted, guilt drawing lines across his face. Before either could respond, Mr. Harlan cleared his throat again. "And now," he said, tapping the envelope before me, "for his final instruction." The room went still. Even the clock seemed to hold its breath. Mr. Harlan slid the envelope a little closer to me, not forcing it, just guiding it into the light. My fingers rested on the edge. The paper was smooth, its weight familiar now. I didn't rush. I breathed in once, steady, before breaking the seal. Inside was a single page, folded neatly. Michael's handwriting covered the top half. Slow, careful strokes shaped during the months when his strength came and went. I unfolded it gently, smoothing the crease with my thumb. I read the first line silently. If you're reading this, then I didn't get the chance to say goodbye properly. My breath hitched, but I kept reading. He hadn't written long sentences. Just small, simple truths, placed one after another like stepping stones. I saw more than I let on. I always did. I wanted you to have peace. I wanted you to have choices. And I wanted you to know that none of this was your fault. My daughter-in-law shifted in her seat, restless, impatient for information that wasn't meant for her. My son watched me with a tightness in his jaw, as if bracing for a verdict he couldn't anticipate. I continued reading. Take whatever time you need before returning home. It is yours. Not because of paperwork, but because it was built with your hands beside mine. I closed my eyes for a moment. The room was silent, except for the faint hum of the overhead light. Then I read the final part, the only section written in darker ink, as if he had pressed harder to make sure the message carried. If anyone tries to take your place, I trust you to stand your ground. You always stood strong for me. Now let me stand strong for you. I set the letter down carefully. My daughter-in-law leaned forward. What does it say? Her voice was tight, as if trying to keep calm. I didn't answer her. I didn't need to. Mr. Harlan cleared his throat softly. There is an additional instruction at the bottom, he said. Your husband asked that I explain it verbally. He glanced at me for permission. I nodded once. He turned to my son and daughter-in-law. Michael requested that, effective immediately, all decisions regarding the house and the Willow Ridge property fall solely to his wife. No permissions needed from either of you. My son's shoulders slumped further. Not in defiance, more in resignation. My daughter-in-law's voice trembled. So she can just tell us to leave? Yes, the lawyer said. Her eyes widened, panic flickering beneath the surface. But we've lived there. And you may remain, Mr. Harlan said calmly, only if she chooses. Her face tightened, as if the floor beneath her had tilted. My son finally spoke, voice low. Mom, what do you want to do? I looked at him. Really looked. He wasn't a boy anymore. He wasn't even the man he had been when Michael was alive. Grief had changed him. Influence had changed him. But for the first time in a long while, his eyes were open. I folded the letter and placed it back into the envelope. I haven't decided yet, I said quietly. But I will. My daughter-in-law's breath caught. She waited for more, some signal, some mercy she was no longer certain of. But I said nothing else. Sometimes silence is the only truth strong enough to hold a moment in place. And in that room, my silence carried farther than any declaration could have. When the meeting ended, no one moved at first. My son stared at the table, breathing slowly, as if he were trying to steady ground that kept shifting beneath him. My daughter-in-law sat rigid, hands clasped so tightly her knuckles were white. The truth had left its mark on all of us, each in different ways. I stood carefully, slipping the envelope into my purse. The room felt lighter now, still sad, still full of echoes, but lighter. Mr. Harlan walked us to the door, his expression gentle, respectful in the quiet way people adopt when they know a family has been cracked open. Outside, the morning sun had risen fully, warm on my face. My son stepped out behind me, hesitated, then touched my arm. Mom, he said, voice low, I should have defended you. I should have seen what was happening. I didn't answer immediately. The breeze stirred a few leaves along the sidewalk. The world kept moving softly as if urging us forward. He lowered his eyes. I'm sorry. Those two words didn't erase the silence of the past weeks. They didn't undo the dinner table where he couldn't meet my eyes. But they left a small opening, something fragile, something possible. I hear you, I said quietly. He nodded once, unsure what to do with my calm. He wasn't used to it. My daughter-in-law waited behind him, frozen in hesitation. Her anger had softened into something more brittle. Fear, maybe. Or the realization that she no longer held the power she thought she did. I'll need time, I told my son, before I decide anything. He swallowed. Whatever you choose, I'll accept it. That was enough. For now. I walked past them, down the steps, toward the sidewalk. My steps were steady. The folder rested against my hip with each stride, its weight no longer heavy, just present. At the crosswalk, I paused. Cars passed. A school bus rumbled by, children's voices floating through the open window. Life continued in its gentle orbit. I reached into my purse and touched the envelope one more time, tracing the edge Michael had sealed with those careful hands. His words echoed quietly in my mind. You always stood strong for me. Now let me stand strong for you. For the first time since he passed, I felt him beside me, not in the ache of grief, but in the certainty of support, the kind that lingers long after someone is gone. I crossed the street slowly, the sunlight warming the back of my shoulders. The bus stop waited ahead. The day stretched open before me, wide enough to hold both sorrow and something new. I didn't know exactly where I would go next. Maybe back to the motel for one more night. Maybe to Willow Ridge when I felt ready. Maybe home. But as I walked, I felt something shift. Quiet, subtle, steady. Not victory, not revenge, just peace. The kind that comes when truth finally finds its place. And for the first time in weeks, I knew this. I hadn't been erased. I had simply begun again.